Hey everyone, today our group topic is about an ancient wonders of the world, which is the Parthenon of Athens in Greece. They're about the architects, the way they build it, the materials and such. Well, please enjoy our presentation.
Athens is one of the oldest named cities in the world, having been continuously inhabited at least 7,000 years. Situated in southern Europe, Athens became the leading city of ancient Greece. Athens became the leading city of ancient Greece in the first millennium BC, and its cultural achievement during the 5th century BC laid the foundation of Western civilization. During the early Middle Age, the city experienced a decline that recovered under later Byzantine Empire and was relatively prosperous during the period of Crusades, benefiting from Italian trade. Following a period of sharp decline under the rule of Ottoman Empire, Athens re-emerged in the 19th century as a capital of the independent Greek state. Well, now I should explain more about how does Athens names come. Athens, connected to the name of patron goddess Athena, originates from the earlier and random city-states pre-Greek language. The etiology myth explaining how Athens acquired the name through the legendary contest between Poseidon and Athena was described by Herodotus, Apollodorus, or Plutarch.
It's very hard to pronounce.
Very hard really.
Hey.
1, 2, 3, start.
Pausanias and others, it even becomes the theme of sculpture of Western Parthenon of the Parthenon. Both Athena and Poseidon request to be patrons of the city and to give their name to it. So they compete with one another for the honor, offerings the city one gift each. Poseidon produced a spring of striking the ground with his trident, symbolizing naval power. Athena praised the olive tree, symbolizing peace and prosperity. The Athenians, under their ruler Cecrops, accept the olive trees and named the city after Athena. The Asgard olive tree says to be the one created the goddess, which was still kept on the Acropolis at the time of Pausanias. It was located by the temple of Prodosus next to the Parthenon. According to the Herodotus, the tree had been burned down during the Persian War, but a shoot sprang from the start. To the Greeks, they saw this is a symbol that Athena still had her mark there on the city. Now I should talk about geographical setting. The sites of which Athens stands was first inhabited in the Neolithic period, perhaps as a defensible settlement on the top of Acropolis. Around the end of the 4th millennium BC or a little later, the Acropolis is a natural defensive position which commands the surrounding plains. The settlement was about 20 kilometers in length from the Saronic Gulf. In the center of the Sapisian plain, a fertile valley surrounded by rivers. To the east lies Mount Hymettus. To the north, Mount Pentelis. Ancient Athens is the first millennium BC occupied a very small area compared to the sprawling metropolis of modern Greece. The ancient walled city encompasses an area measuring about 2 kilometers from east to the west, slightly less than from north to the south. Although, at its peak, the ancient city had suburbs extending well beyond this wall. The Acropolis was situated just south of the center of this wall area. The Agora The commercial and social center of the city lay about 400 meters, 1,312 feet north of the Acropolis, in what is now the monastic district. The Hill of Prince, where the Eternal Assembly met, lay at the western end of the city. The Eridanus River flowed through the city. One of the most important religious sites in ancient Athens was the Temple of Athena, known today as the Parthenon, which stood on top of the Acropolis, which is an evocative ruin, still stands to other major religious sites. The Temple of Hephaestus and the Temple of Olympian Zeus, or Olympium, also lay within the city wall. According to the Thucydides, the Athenian citizens at the beginning of the Peloponnesian War number 40,000, making with their families a total of 140,000 people in all the matches. Those who did not have citizen rights and paid for the rights besides in Athens number a further 70,000, while slaves were estimated at between 450,000 to 400,000.
In Greek culture, there is no greater achievement than the world-famous Parthenon atop the Acropolis of Athens. Though it has not been used for many centuries, but it still holds the power over the local resident and also the tourists alike. The Parthenon was created as a tribute to the goddess Athena, who is also the patron goddess of the Athens. After the Greek victory in the Persian War, the Parthenon was proposed by Pericles in 5th century before Christ era as a way to thank the goddess for protecting the city. But then unfortunately, her power was not strong enough to. The Parthenon was created as a tribute to the goddess Athena, who is the patron goddess of the Athens. After the Greek victory in the Persian War, the Parthenon was proposed by Pericles in 5th century before Christ era as a way to thank the goddess for protecting the city. But then unfortunately, her power was not strong enough to prevent the previous temple from being destroyed by the Persians. Construction began in 447 before Christ era, and the superstructure was finished by the 438 before Christ era, while the exterior and the interior decoration continued through to 433 before Christ era. Detailed financial documents still exist today, and it clearly shows that the building was required a large amount of the money to move the stone from the Mount Pentelicus to the Acropolis. For 1,000 years, the Parthenon was the most important Greek temple and also a prominent feature of the Athens landscape. One of the Roman emperors looted the Parthenon of the great statue of the Athena in the 5th century Common Era. Unfortunately, the Parthenon was raided by a Roman emperor, and the statue of the cult image of Athena was stolen and taken to Constantinople, where it was later destroyed. By the 13th century, it was converted to a Christian church. The Christians converted the Parthenon in honor of Parthena Maria, which means the Virgin Mary, or the Church of the Theotokos, the Mother of the God, which is remained for around 250 years. Turning the temple into a church meant that the building was still kept in a good condition, apart from a bit of restructuring internally. For example, a few of the columns were removed as well as some of the marble statue. Again, the Parthenon was well maintained and looked after until the late 17th century. In 1687, the Venetians under Francesco Morosini attacked the Ottomans in Athens. The Acropolis had been fortified by the Ottomans as well as the Athenians over a century before. The building was also used it as a gunpowder store, and the Parthenon took a direct hit from the mortar fire by the Venetians from the hill of Philopappus. The gunpowder exploded and destroyed a large part of the building. Morosini and his men soon plundered the building, looting what they could find in the Morosini and his men soon plundered the building, looting what they could find and destroying the rest, leaving the partial ruins that can be seen today. As most from the drawing by Jack Carey, a Flemish artist in 1674, what was left was further damaged in 1801, when many of the depictions and the remaining antique were forcibly removed. It was only in 1975 that a concerted effort was made by the Greek government with help from Europe to try and restore the damage caused by the explosion as well as the modern day damage caused by the pollution. Unfortunately, the Parthenon will never be restored to its former glory. The Parthenon was truly a good achievement, but it is still an example of how the wars of man can ruin a good thing.
Hey guys, now let's talk about Parthenon architects. Callicrates is one of the ancient architects in the middle of 5th century before Christ. Callicrates and Ictinus were the architects of Parthenon. They worked together to build Parthenon till it's done. From an inscription of 449 before Christ, the year is actually the year of signing peace with Persia, that the Senate commissioned Callicrates to construct the temple of Athena Nike, also known as the Wingless Victory on Parthenon Acropolis. The construction finally began in 427 before Christ, and the temple was completed in 424 before Christ. Callicrates and Ictinus were the architects of Parthenon and the largest Doric temple on the Greek mainland. According to the inscription on the building, the construction was begun at 447 before Christ, and the building was completed and dedicated in 438 before Christ at Parthenon. On the basis of stylistic similarities, a small Ionic temple on the bank of Ilissos River in Athens was attributed to Callicrates, and a Doric temple to Apollo, built by Athenians on the island of Delos. The next architect is Ictinus, a Greek architect, one of the most celebrated of Athens, known for his work on Parthenon, on the Acropolis, the Temple of Mysteries at Eleusis, and the Temple of Apollo Epicurus at Athens. Ictinus designed Parthenon with Callicrates, although there are some speculations that they were not collaborators but actually rivals. That Ictinus continued the work begun by Callicrates. So, Ictinus was also involved in the rebuilding and enlargement of the Telestrion Hall at the Temple of Demeter and Persephone at Eleusis in collaboration with Corybus, Metagenes, and Xenocles. The Telestrion Hall, where Eleusinian mysteries were performed, was square hall with rock-cut seats. Ictinus probably worked at Eleusis for about 430 before Christ, sometime after he completed his work on the Parthenon. The Temple of Apollo Epicurus at Bassae was said to be modeled after the Temple of Athena Elei. Most of the columns of the temple still stand. A sculptured Ionic frieze from the Temple of Apollo at Bassae, which has remained fairly good condition, is among the treasures of the British Museum in London. It's actually in London, you can go try it. The next and last architect he is not an architect, he's a sculptor. His name is Phidias, an Athenian sculptor, the artistic director of construction of the Parthenon, who created its most important religious images and supervised and probably the design is overall sculptural decoration. It is said of Phidias that he alone had seen the exact image of the gods and he revealed it to man. He established forever general conception of Zeus and Athena. A little is known about Phidias' life. When Pericles rose to power in 449 before Christ, he initiated a great building program in Athens and placed Phidias in charge of all artistic undertakings. Among works for which Phidias is famous are 3 monuments to Athena on Athenian Acropolis and the colossal seated Zeus for Among works for which Phidias is famous are 3 monuments to Athena and Athenian Acropolis and the colossal seated Zeus for the temple Zeus at Olympia. The colossal statue of Athena Parthenon, which Phidias made for Parthenon, was completed and dedicated in 438 before Christ. The goddess stood erect, wearing a tunic, aegis, and helmet, holding a Nike, goddess of victory, in her extended right hand and a spear in her left hand. A decorated shield and a serpent were by her side. Phidias' last year's mystery remains a mystery. Perseus' enemies accused Phidias of stealing gold from the statue of Athena Parthenon in 432 before Christ, but he was able to disapprove the charge. They then accused him of impiety. He was thrown into prison. Until recently, it was thought that Phidias died in prison shortly thereafter. Thank you.
The Parthenon was built from about 447 before Christ era to 432 before Christ era. It has porch columns to hold up the ceiling, which is made up of marble. Patterns on the ceiling, which indicates that there were skilled artists who dedicated their time to creating paintings in this remarkable temple. The floor plan is in the shape of a rectangle, having small steps on each side. It also has columns in the hold up of the roof. At each entrance, there are 6 columns which existed on the Athenian Acropolis before the Parthenon. One was situated a little bit away from where the Parthenon was located, but the other was directly underneath it when they started building the Parthenon. Next is a walkthrough of the Parthenon. First, the road leading up to the propylae of the Acropolis was surrounded by many shrines to smaller gods to goddesses, including the minor god Pan. Approaching the propylae, the Athena Nike temple is to the right. As one walks through the propylae, they will see the Parthenon temple also to the right. The Chalcotic is seen on the right, just uphill from the Parthenon, which housed the treasury. Above the Chalcotic is the Parthenon, which is the grandest building in the area. To return from the Parthenon to the propylae, one will pass the statue of Athena Promachos, which was so large it could be seen from 5 kilometers out at the sea. The Erythrius was further down the hill and was built before Athens fell to the Spartan. It combines 3 old shrines into one large building. It is also believed that this was the location of the battle between Athena and Poseidon for the possession of the city. The Pandrosion was a shrine dedicated to Zeus, but was named after Pandrosis, who was the daughter of an Athenian king named Cecrops. Off to the right a ways lies the old temple of Athena, which was later destroyed by the Persians. Next, I would like to talk about the architectural features of Parthenon. Each entrance has an additional 6 columns in front of it. The larger of the 2 interior rooms, the naos, housed the cut statue. The smaller room was used as a treasury. Here is a plan of the temple. The Parthenon is a peripteral temple, which means that it consists of a rectangular floor plan with a series of blue steps on every side on the colonnade of Doric columns extending around the periphery of the entire structure. It was built to replace 2 earlier temples of Athena on the Acropolis, one of these, of which almost no trace remains today, to the south of the Parthenon, between the Parthenon and the Erythrium. The other, which was still being built at the time of the Persian sack in 480, was on the same spot as the Parthenon. We know that names of the architects like Ictinos and Callicrates, and also of the sculpture which is Phidias, who made the massive chrysanthemum cult statue of the goddess. Next is the orders. The 3 main types of columns used in Greek temples and other public buildings are Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. The truest and most basic difference among the others has to do with proportions, as for example being thicker and shorter, Ionic columns taller and slimmer. As a shortcut, the order may be distinguished most easily by their capitals, which is the top of the columns. As you can see from the following example, the Doric capital has the simplest design, the Ionic has the Calicus called volutes, and the Corinthian has the Equus leaves. Doric is not only a type of column, but an order. This means that temples of the Doric order not only have this type of column, but also have a certain structure at the upper levels. The different types of orders are illustrated by these diagrams from poses like Doric order and Ionic order. The Doric order is categorized by the series of melatops on the entablature. Each melatop was occupied by a panel of relief sculpture. The Parthenon combines elements of the Doric and Ionic orders. Basically, a Doric peripheral temple, it features a continuous sculptured frieze borrowed from the Ionic order, as well as 4 Ionic columns supporting the roof of the opisthedomos. Next is the metops. The metops of the Parthenon all represented various instances of the struggle between the forces of order and justice on the one hand and criminal chaos on the other. On the west side, the mythical battle against the Amazon. On the south, the battle between the Lepis and the Cantos. On the east, the battle between the gods and giants. And on the north, the Greeks versus the Trojans. Next is the pedimental sculptures. These relief sculptures, larger than those of the metops, occupy the triangle space above the tripes and metops. Those at the west end of the temple depicted the contest between the Poseidon and Athena for the right to be the patron deity of Athens. The eastern pedimental group showed the birth of Athena from Zeus' head. The pedimental sculpture suffered badly when the Parthenon was hit by a Venetian shell in 1687 and the powder magazine inside exploded. This reclining god from the east pediment gives some sense of the quality of the sculpture. Next is the frieze. The Parthenon frieze runs around the upper edge of the temple wall. Its relatively small size, which is 3 feet and 5 inches tall, and placement inside from the traps and metops made it fairly hard to see from the ground. Unlike the metops, the frieze has a single subject on all 4 sides. On 3 sides, which are north, west and south, it depicts a procession of horsemen, musicians, sacrificial animals and other figures with various ritual function. On the east side, there is a scene centered on a child handing a folded cloth to an older man. On one side of them, seated gods and goddesses are in attendance. On the other, the 2 girls are carrying something, although the state of preserving is poor. The interpretation of the subject has hotly debated. Most scholars agree that it represents the Pentatonic procession, but some think it is a mythical, original procession, while others believe that it is the procession which took place in the same period as the temple was built. And this illustrates the overconfident spirit of the Athenians, who dared to put themselves where ordinarily only gods and heroes might be found. Recently, the debate has taken a new turn with the publication of a radical original theory by John B. Connelly. Here is the detailed summary of Connelly's ideas and some questions about them. Connelly's theory depends on a reinterpretation of the scene from the East frieze. That's all. Thank you.
I'll be talking about the ornaments and sculptures used in the Parthenon. An ornament is basically a decoration, a thing used for serving to make something look more attractive but usually having no practical purpose, especially a small object such as a figurine. It can also be an accessory of worship such as an altar, chalice, and sacred vessels. It serves to make something look more attractive, while a sculpture is an art of making 2 or 3-dimensional representative of or abstract forms, especially by carving stone, wood, or by casting metal or plaster. In the Parthenon, the doors were decorated with sculptures of gorgons, lion heads, and other bronze relief ornaments. The cellar of the Parthenon housed the chryselephantine statue of Athena Parthenos sculpted by Phidias and dedicated around 438 or 439 before Christ era. The statue is used as an accessory of worship by the citizens of Athens. The decorative stonework was originally highly colored. The temple was dedicated to Athena at that time, though construction continued until almost the beginning of the Peloponnesian War in 432. By the year 438, the sculptural decoration of the Doric metopes on the frieze above the exterior colonnade and the Ionic frieze around the upper portion of the walls of the cella had been completed. The richness of the Parthenon's frieze and the metopes decoration is in agreement with the function of the temple as a treasury. In the Opisthodomus, which is the back room of the cella, was stored the monetary contributions of the Delian League, of which Athens was the leading member. The frieze of the Parthenon's entablature contained 92 metopes. They were carved in high relief, a practice employed until then only in treasuries. According to the building records, the metope sculptures date to the years 446 to 440 before Christ era. Their design is attributed to the sculptor Calamis. The metopes of the east side of the Parthenon above the main entrance depict the gigantomachy, which is the mythical battles between the Olympian gods and the giants. The metopes of the west and show Amazonomachy, which is the mythical battle of the Athenians against the Amazons. The metopes of the south side show the Thessalian Centauromachy, which is the battle of Lepis aided by Theseus against the half-man, half-horse centaurs. Metopes 13 to 21 are missing, but drawings from 1674 attributed to Jacques Carey indicate a series of humans. These have been variously interpreted as scenes from the Lepith wedding, scenes from the early history of Athens, and various myths. On the north side of the Parthenon, the metopes are poorly preserved, but the subject seems to be the sack of Troy. The metopes present examples of the severe style in the anatomy of the figures' heads, in the limitation of the corporal movements to the contours and not to the muscles, and in the presence of pronounced veins in the figures of the Centauromachy. Several of the metopes still remain on the building, but with the exception of those on the northern side, they are severely damaged. Some of them are located at the Acropolis Museum, others are in the British museums, and one is at the Louvre Museum.
3 minit 3 minit 50 saat.
The Romans conquered Greece in the 2nd century before Christ era and looted many of the centuries that time. Many statues and forms of artwork were taken back to Rome, but not from the Acropolis in Athens. During the Middle Ages, a few of the temples of the Acropolis were converted into Christian church. The Parthenon became a church to the Virgin Saint Mary and was later converted to a mosque when the Turks came into the 16th century. In the 17th century, the Venetians bombarded the Acropolis. The Parthenon exploded because the Turkish used it as a storage room for gunpowder. The temple was badly damaged, and this is why the temple does not have a roof today. In the 19th century, the Englishman Lord Elgin took the famous Greek marble statues known as the Parthenon marbles. They are now housed in British Museum. The Greeks are now still trying to get the marbles back, but with no success. Despite the acts of war, poor building strategies and time and poor restoration techniques, population in modern Athens is the Acropolis' worst enemy. This is because, despite the acts of war, poor building strategies, time or poor restoration techniques, pollution in modern Athens in the Acropolis' worst enemy. The problem has been known for decades, but a solution has yet to be developed. The Parthenon has been a Greek temple, but it has always been a treasury, fortress, a church, a mosque, and a shelter for the statue of Parthenon, which was made out of gold and ivory. The construction of Parthenon cost the Athenian treasury 469 silver talents, while it was impossible to convert that to a modern equivalent. By comparison, 1 talent was the cost to build most advanced warship of that time. The Parthenon replaced the structure that was destroyed by the Persians early in 400 before Christ era. This building was referred as the Parthenon or the older Parthenon. The classic Parthenon was stands today was actually built over its ruins. The older Parthenon was built as a Doric peripteral temple, which means it was to be designed with a single row of columns on the 4 sides, and it would be rectangular with 3 stairs on all sides. This design is similar to that of the classic Parthenon, however not exact. Assuming of existence of 3 steps, the earlier Parthenon was longer and narrower at 29.6 meter by 75.06 meter by existing building, which was 330.86 meter by 69.51 meter. Thank you.
It is very amazing how the Parthenon could survive all these years, although it has been partly destroyed, while it is being restored at the moment until the present time. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Thank you.